Some men go their whole lives waiting to be respected. I spent mine earning it in silence, one contract at a time, until the day my son-in-law decided my daughter had married beneath her fiancé's name. He was wrong about a lot of things. That was the one that cost him. Welcome to Dad's fierce revenge. Pour yourself something warm, find a comfortable chair, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to do the right thing. They just didn't. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. It was a Thursday morning in late November, Edmonton, Alberta. The kind of cold that doesn't ask permission. -23 with the wind coming down off the river valley, frost on every window. The kind of day where your breath hangs in the air for a half second before it disappears. I was in my workshop behind the house, the one my wife used to call my thinking garage, working through a stack of invoices I'd been putting off for a week. Old habit. I've always done my paperwork by hand first before anything goes into the system. Call it stubbornness. Call it distrust of computers. My accountant calls it aggressively old-fashioned. I call it knowing exactly where every dollar is. My phone rang at 8:52 in the morning. My daughter. On a Thursday, during school hours. She teaches grade 4 in Sherwood Park. She does not call during school hours. I picked up before the second ring. Sweetheart? Silence. Then a sound I hadn't heard from her in 22 years. Not since her mother's funeral. A kind of controlled breathing. The kind you do when you're trying to hold something together that's already come apart. Dad. Just that word. Just my name on her lips, broken at the edges. Can you come? I'm at the school, but I'm on my lunch break and I don't know what to do. I was already pulling on my coat. I found her in her car in the school parking lot, engine running, heater on full. She was still in her teacher clothes. Dark green cardigan, her hair pulled back, the small gold earrings her mother gave her the Christmas before she passed. She looked exactly like her mother used to look when the world got too heavy. Sitting very still, like moving would make it real. I got into the passenger seat without a word. I sat there for a moment. Just sat. Looking out through the windshield at the flat gray Edmonton sky, the rows of portable classrooms, a few kids in neon snow pants running across the yard. Then I looked at her. Tell me. She exhaled, long and slow. Marcus called me this morning, right before first bell. She stopped, pressed her lips together. He said he'd spoken to his father, that his father had made some calls, that she stopped again. Marcus, my son-in-law of 6 years, whose father, Edmund Stanhope, ran a commercial real estate firm out of a glass tower on 109th Street and had never once, in 6 years of dinners and holidays and handshakes, looked at me like I was worth looking at. What kind of calls? I said. Flat, calm. The way I get when I'm already thinking 3 steps ahead, and my voice is the last thing that needs to be wasted. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. That jaw is mine. I've seen it in the mirror every morning for 63 years. He went to the school board. Her voice was very quiet now. His father did. He knows someone on the committee. He filed a complaint, some nonsense about professional conduct. Nothing real, Dad. But they've asked me to take administrative leave while they review. I let that land. Administrative leave, starting Monday. He got you suspended. It's not technically. He got you suspended, I said again. Not loudly, not angrily. Just clearly. She looked down at her hands in her lap. Marcus told me this morning that if I want to protect my job, I need to agree to a separation. That his father has been pushing for it since last year. She stopped, swallowed. He said his father told him that I came from a family that didn't have the right foundation for the Stanhope name. Foundation. I sat with that word the way you sit with something that smells wrong. You don't rush to react. You just let it be what it is. And Marcus agreed with that? I asked. She didn't answer right away. That was its own answer. He didn't disagree, she said softly. I nodded once. Looked back out the windshield. The bell rang somewhere inside the school, muffled through the glass. Kids started moving back toward the doors. You have class in 4 minutes. Go teach your kids. I put my hand over hers for just a moment. I'll be at the house when you're done today. You understand me? She looked at me. Dad, what are you going to? Go teach your kids. She knew that tone. Every daughter knows that tone. The one that doesn't leave room for follow-up questions. She went back inside. I sat in that parking lot for 90 seconds longer, looking at nothing in particular. Then I started my truck. A 2011 F-150, 340,000 kilometers on it. Still runs perfectly, because I maintain the things that matter to me. And I drove south on the Whitemud. Edmund Stanhope thought my daughter didn't have the right foundation. 31 years ago, I incorporated a land development company out of a rented office above a Vietnamese restaurant on 97th Street with $11,000, a drafting table, and a contact list that fit on one side of an index card. I named it after the river that runs through this city because I thought it was the most honest thing in Edmonton. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make speeches. It just keeps moving, winter and summer, year after year, carving its way through whatever's in front of it. North Saskatchewan Land Holdings. 4 subsidiaries now. Commercial leasing, residential development, property management, and a construction arm that does mid-rise builds across the province. 47 full-time employees. A client portfolio that covers most of downtown Edmonton and a good chunk of the Nisku Industrial Corridor. I drove a 2011 F-150 and had never once mentioned any of it to Edmund Stanhope. Not because I was ashamed, because I was watching. My operations director, a Métis woman from Fort Saskatchewan named Renee, who's been with me 19 years and has forgotten more about land title law than most lawyers ever learn, was already at her desk when I walked in at 10 past 10. She looked up, looked at my face, and put down her coffee. "Which file?" she said. "Stanhope Commercial Realty," I said. She was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "That's the Stanhope from Yes." She turned to her computer. "They've got 2 properties in our portfolio, the Parsons Road development and the Milbourne storage units, both on long-term lease agreements. Stanhope holds the anchor tenant position on Parsons Road. That's their flagship location. Pull the lease agreements," I said. "Both of them. And pull the standard performance review clause." She already knew what I was going to say next. She knew because she helped me write those clauses in 2009, and she understood exactly what they were designed for. "We have a review window coming up in January," she said slowly. "We do? You want to open it early?" "I want to do this correctly," I said. "By the book. I want every step documented, every notice properly dated, every communication in writing. I want there to be no question that North Saskatchewan Land Holdings followed procedure exactly." She nodded slowly. The particular nod of someone who understands that what sounds routine is anything but. "And the new property manager for the Parsons Road file," she said. "I'm promoting someone," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "You don't have a property manager with that much experience on staff right now. I will by Monday." I left her to it and went upstairs to my office. Corner room, 2nd floor, big windows facing the river valley to the north. On a clear day you can see the bridge. Today the valley was buried in gray, and I couldn't see much of anything, which suited my mood fine. I picked up my phone and dialed my daughter. Voicemail. "Still in class." Good. I dialed again. Her husband this time. "Marcus?" He answered on the 3rd ring, cautious. He'd always been cautious with me, which I'd taken for respect and now understood differently. "Hi, Gord." "Don't," I said. "Not today." Silence. "I'm going to say something to you, Marcus, and I'm going to say it once. You are going to listen without speaking until I'm finished. Are we clear?" A long pause. "Yes. My daughter has given 6 years to your family. She has attended every Stanhope function, every dinner, every Christmas in that house in Glenora, where your father looks at the help like their furniture. She has been gracious and professional and warm to people who have never once extended the same courtesy to her. To us. I let that land. Your father filed a false complaint with the school board. That is a serious matter. Whatever he may have told you, there is no legitimate professional conduct issue with my daughter. What he did was use a personal connection to weaponize a bureaucratic process against a woman whose only offense was being married to you." More silence, and the word he used. "Foundation." I said it carefully. "I want you to think very carefully about what your father meant by that word. And about whether you're comfortable being the man who didn't push back. Gord, I'm not finished." My voice stayed even. That took some effort. "I'm not calling you to make threats, Marcus. I'm calling you because there is still a version of this where you do the right thing. You call off your father. You go to the school board yourself and retract that complaint. You have that conversation with your wife that you should have had the night your father first started talking about foundations." Silence. "If that doesn't happen," I said, "then things will proceed in a different direction. Not because I want them to. Because your father set them in motion." I ended the call. My daughter arrived at the house at 4:45. I'd made soup, tomato from scratch, the way her mother used to, with good bread from the bakery on 124th Street. Comfort food is not weakness. It's precision. You give someone exactly what the moment requires. She came in looking exhausted and braced, the way you look when you're expecting more bad news. She saw the soup on the stove and something in her shoulders dropped just slightly. Sit down, I said. She sat at the kitchen table, wrapped both hands around the bowl, and looked at me over the steam. Dad, what did you do? Nothing yet, I said. Are you still in love with Marcus? The question surprised her. She opened her mouth, closed it. That's a complicated. It's a yes or a no, sweetheart. She looked down at her soup. A long time passed. I don't know who I'm in love with anymore, she said quietly. The Marcus I married, yes. The Marcus, who took 3 days to tell me what his father was doing. She shook her head. I don't know that man. Okay. I put a piece of bread on her plate. Then we take this one day at a time. You take care of your kids, you let the school board investigation run its course, and you let me take care of the rest. You're scaring me a little. Good. Means you're paying attention. She almost smiled. Almost. What's the rest? She asked. I sat down across from her. I'd thought about how to say this for the better part of 30 years. Not to her specifically. Just in general. To whoever I'd eventually have this conversation with, because I always knew it would come someday. You know I started the company when you were 12, I said. The land company.
Yes.
You've always been private about it. More than private, I said. Quiet. On purpose. I watched your grandfather's business get picked apart when people found out what he had. Brothers coming out of the woodwork. Old friends with new needs. I decided early that I was going to build in silence. No announcements. No profile pieces. No industry dinners. Just work. She was watching me carefully now. North Saskatchewan Land Holdings, I said. You know the name. You've mentioned it. I've never mentioned the size of it. She was very still. We manage approximately 40 million in commercial property across the province, I said. We have 47 employees. The Parsons Road Commercial Development, the one that Edmund Stanhope uses as his flagship location, the one he takes clients to, the one he put on his Christmas card 2 years ago. That building is ours. His company has been leasing anchor tenant space in our building for 7 years. The room was very quiet. Edmund Stanhope, she said slowly, has been paying rent to your company, to North Saskatchewan Land Holdings. Yes, and he doesn't know you own it. He knows a numbered company owns it. He's never asked further. People with that kind of money often don't look past what's comfortable. She set her spoon down. Dad, Edmund Stanhope, called our family the wrong foundation for his name, I said, while writing a check to my company every month. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the furnace kick on somewhere in the basement. What are you going to do? She said, voice barely above a whisper. I'm going to conduct a standard lease performance review, I said. It's in the contract. Scheduled. Procedural. Nothing personal. And who's going to conduct the review? I looked at her for a moment. Then I slid an envelope across the kitchen table. She looked at it, looked at me. She picked it up and opened it. It was a formal letter. An offer of employment. North Saskatchewan Land Holdings. Director of Commercial Leasing. Edmonton Region. The compensation was enough that she read the number twice. Dad, she said, and her voice had changed into something I hadn't heard in a very long time. You have a business degree, I said. You used it for 2 years before you went back to teaching. You are organized, you are sharp, and you know how to handle people who think they're more important than they are. I love teaching, then teach. The position doesn't start until the school board finishes their review, which will conclude with a full exoneration because there is nothing to find. The offer stands either way. Whether you take it full-time or part-time or walk away from it in a year, it's yours to decide. She was still looking at the letter, but in the meantime I said, You are the Director of Commercial Leasing, and it will be your name on the performance review correspondence that goes to Stanhope Commercial Realty. The silence stretched out. He'll know, she said softly. When he sees my name, he'll know, eventually. First he'll make some calls. He'll ask around. He'll try to find out who owns this company and what's behind this review. And when he figures it out, I sat back in my chair. He'll have to call you. She looked up at me. I watched her face in that kitchen, my daughter, her mother's eyes, my jaw, 41 years old and carrying 6 years of someone else's family's quiet contempt. And I watched the moment she understood. She picked up the pen from the kitchen table, the one I'd set there next to her plate where she could reach it. She signed the letter. The formal performance review notice went out that Friday afternoon via registered mail and email simultaneously. Standard North Saskatchewan Land Holdings letterhead. Professional, measured, correct in every detail. It cited Section 6, Article 3 of the Master Lease Agreement, the standard review clause that every tenant signed and almost none of them ever read carefully. All payments suspended pending review. Response window, 30 days. I know what happened on Edmund Stanhope's end because Marcus told me later, after everything had settled, when he was trying to put together what had gone wrong. Edmund had called his lawyer Friday evening. His lawyer had called the numbered company's registered agent. That agent had referred him to North Saskatchewan Land Holdings' administrative line. Monday morning, Edmund's assistant called that line. Renee answered, gave her name and title, and told them the review was proceeding as scheduled and that all inquiries should be directed to the Director of Commercial Leasing. My daughter took the call Tuesday morning, standing at Renee's desk because her own office wasn't set up yet. She told me later she was holding a cup of coffee in her left hand and it was completely steady. "This is Christine," she said. The pause on the other end of the line lasted exactly long enough for Edmund Stanhope to realize what had happened. Christine. His voice, she said, was very careful. The voice of a man recalibrating in real time. This is Edmund Stanhope. I believe there may be some confusion about. There's no confusion, Edmund. She set her coffee down. I have the lease file in front of me. The review was triggered by a clause your company agreed to in 2017. Page 14, Section 6, Article 3. We followed procedure exactly. Silence. I wasn't aware, he said finally. That I was involved with this company? More silence. I've been my father's daughter for 41 years, she said. You just never asked. I was in my office upstairs when she said it. I heard it through the open door. I'm not embarrassed to say I had to put down what I was holding for a moment. Edmund Stanhope asked to meet. My daughter arranged it for Thursday afternoon. She was in the boardroom when he arrived. She told me she'd gotten there 20 minutes early, made sure the files were arranged, made sure the light was good, made sure she was standing when he walked in, not sitting, so she controlled the geometry of the room from the first second. He came in looking exactly like a man who had spent 68 years expecting rooms to arrange themselves around him, and had just discovered that this one had other ideas. She gestured to the chair across the table. Thanks for coming in, Edmund. Sit down. He sat. She told me afterward that he didn't speak for almost 30 seconds. He looked around the boardroom, at the North Saskatchewan Land Holdings plaque on the wall, at the photograph of the Parsons Road development on the east side, the one that's been his company's address for 7, at the nameplate in front of her that said Director of Commercial Leasing, and she watched him understand. Christine. He folded his hands on the table. I think there are some things that need to be said between us. Personally. Before we talk about the business review. All right, she said. What I said to Marcus about your family. He stopped. Started again. I said things that were wrong, that were based on another stop, on assumptions that were not. He set his jaw. I was wrong about your father, about you, about what your family represents. My daughter, who got her stubbornness from me and her grace from her mother, let the silence sit for exactly as long as it needed to. I appreciate you saying that, she said finally. Genuinely. I'd like to, he paused. I'd like to speak to your father. If that's possible. That's between you and him, she said. That's not a business matter. What is a business matter is the lease review, and I'd like to get through that today. She told me he actually nodded at that, with something that looked, she said, like relief. The relief of a man who has been expecting punishment and found out instead that the person across the table is more interested in doing things correctly than in making him bleed. She walked him through the revised terms, adjusted to current market rate, which, given what had happened to commercial property values in Edmonton over 7 years, represented a significant increase. Nothing vindictive. Nothing inflated beyond what was accurate and fair. She had 3 comparables from similar properties in the corridor to support every number. She said he read it twice, slowly. Then he looked up. These are reasonable terms, he said. I know they are, she said. I wrote them. He signed. She called me from the parking lot afterward. I was still in my office, hadn't moved. He signed, she said. I know. How do you know? Because you would have called me sooner if he hadn't. A pause. Then a small sound that was almost a laugh. He wants to talk to you, she said. He can call the main line, I said. That's what it's there for. Dead Christine, are you okay? I looked out my office window at the river valley, buried in November gray, the bridge barely visible through the cloud. 31 years of early mornings and late nights and decisions made in this room, and the one before it, and the one before that. Your grandfather gave me $11,000, I said. When I started, he'd saved it over 20 years working for the city. He handed it to me in an envelope at the kitchen table and he said, I don't know what you're going to build, but I know you'll build something. She was quiet on the other end of the line. He never saw any of this, I said. He died the year we signed our first major contract. I think about that a lot. He'd have been proud. He'd have asked why I was still driving a 2011 truck. That got a real laugh. The first one I'd heard from her in a week. The school board called today, she said, softer now. They're closing the investigation. There was nothing in the complaint that held up. Of course there wasn't. And Marcus? She stopped, a long pause. We talked last night. For a long time. I waited. He's not a bad man, Dad. He's a man who spent his whole life being shaped by a bad one. I don't know yet what that means for us. But I think he's starting to figure out the difference. That's worth something, I said carefully. Yeah. A breath. Yeah, it is. I looked at the photograph on my desk. Christine at 9 years old, standing in front of the first house I ever bought with my own money, holding up a sign that said, "For sale," sold with both arms like she'd won an Olympic medal. Her mother took that photo. I've kept it on every desk I've ever had. You should go home, I said. It's been a long week. It has. A pause. Thank you, Dad. You don't need to thank me. I know, she said. I'm doing it anyway. After she hung up, I sat there for a while in the quiet. The building had emptied out around me. Renee had gone. The admin team had gone. The construction guys had gone home to their families somewhere out in Leduc or St. Albert or the Beaumont subdivisions I'd helped build. The whole fourth floor was just me and the hum of the building systems and the faint sound of Edmonton traffic 11 floors below. Edmund Stanhope called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. He left 3.5 minutes. I listened to it once, standing in my kitchen over coffee. He said what a man in his position says when he's realized that the ceiling he thought he was standing under was actually a floor. He said he was wrong. He said it more than once, in different ways, the way people do when they're not sure they've actually been heard. He said he hoped that whatever happened between Marcus and Christine, he hoped that he stumbled here, stopped, started again. He hoped that I knew he had respect for what I'd built. I deleted it. Not out of cruelty, out of accuracy. What Edmund Stanhope thought of what I'd built had never been the point. The point was Christine. The point was that when the wrong person looked at my family and decided we weren't worth the ground we stood on, there was something solid under that ground. There had always been something solid. It just didn't announce itself. I drove to her house that Saturday morning. Took the Whitewood south to the Terwilligar area where she and Marcus have their place. Pulled up in my truck with a box of groceries. The kind of groceries you bring when you're planning to make a proper breakfast and stay a while. Marcus answered the door. He looked like a man who hadn't slept more than 4 or 5 hours in 10 days, which I suspected was accurate. He also looked like a man who'd done some hard thinking in those 10 days and hadn't run away from it. That matters. That's not nothing. He held the door open. I walked in. We sat in their kitchen for 3 hours, the three of us, and we talked. Not about Stanhope Commercial Realty. Not about lease agreements or business reviews or things I owned that nobody knew about. We talked about Christine. We talked about what a marriage is supposed to be. We talked about the difference between the father you came from and the man you choose to become. Partway through, my granddaughter came downstairs, 7 years old, hair still a mess from sleeping, carrying a stuffed moose that's been with her since she was 2. And she climbed directly into my lap without saying a word, tucked her head under my chin, and went back to sleep. I held on to that for a while. Nobody said anything about foundations. Nobody needed to. I drove home in the late afternoon, back up the Whitewood, the city spreading out in every direction under a sky that had finally decided to be blue again. A proper Alberta blue, sharp and cold, and completely unimpressed with everything underneath it. 31 years. Not one day of it was about proving anything to anyone. It was about building something that would still be standing when I wasn't. Something that could take a hit. Something that could be handed forward. I thought about my grandfather's envelope, $11,000, and everything he had behind his eyes when he handed it to me. I thought about Christine at 9 years old with it for sale, sold sign. I thought about my granddaughter, asleep in my lap with her stuffed moose, completely unbothered by everything that had happened around her this week. trusting without needing to think about it that the adults in her life had it handled. She was right to trust that. That's the whole point of building something, if you do it right. Not so you can win an argument. Not so you can impress the right people. Not so you can watch someone sign a contract under circumstances they didn't anticipate. So that when the storm comes, and it always comes, your family has somewhere real to stand. I got home, fed the dog, made myself coffee, and sat down in the workshop with those invoices I still hadn't finished. Same as every Thursday morning, quietly, completely, exactly where I'm supposed to be.